I'm Austin, and I like cars. And this week, we're going to be talking about one of the greatest American sports cars of all time. One of the greatest cars in American history. And I'm going to be telling you all about it this week, because I like cars. We're talking about the Chevrolet Corvette.
It was the early 1950s, and the only sports car you could get in America had to be imported from Europe. Now, America certainly had good cars, but our best cars from the time were focused on comfort and luxury. You gotta remember, this is a post-World War II era where people were trying to make families. This was the start of the baby boomers after all. Because of this, enormous companies like GM, the biggest company in America, were awash with cash from the economy, but still saw the sports car-shaped hole in their lineup. So when a prototype sports car made by a guy named Harley Earl was created, the bigwigs at Chevy were really intrigued. It was made of this space-age material called fiberglass. It was cheap, and it kept the weight down. It's almost like a 1950s carbon fiber. In fact, the Chevy higher-ups were so impressed by this car called the Corvette, they decided to put it in production almost immediately. It only took from January 1953 to June 1953 to get production on the C1 Corvette started. So, how good was America's first sports car, the C1 Corvette? Well, it was kind of bad. First off, for a sports car, it really didn't do the sports part that well at all. The engine was an inline 6, not a V8, and it was Chevy's first attempt at making a performance engine. And it really showed because it wasn't very fast. It hated revving and could only be gotten with a 2-speed automatic, literally just 2 gears. But on the bright side, the steering was really bad and the brakes would lock up the moment you touched them. Not to mention, early fiberglass tech meant that these cars were essentially handmade, and that led to some serious quality control issues in these original cars. Fortunately, by 1955, the Corvette started to come a bit closer to the American icon we know it as today. All thanks to the help of a man named Zora Arkus Duntov, who got hired at GM after seeing the original Corvette concept before it even released, and was so enamored with the car, he had to become a part of the production. He was so important to the car's development that he would soon become known as the father of the Corvette, even though he wasn't there for the original creation of it. With his first move being to give the Corvette its first V8 option, and an option for a 3-speed manual, which wasn't terrible. In my own opinion, this is honestly where the Corvette legacy truly starts. And I think a lot of people at the time agreed because sales really start to pick up around here. I'm not going to go over every single change that happened with the C1 throughout the years, because literally every year it had some change to the design, whether it be the engine or the actual look of the car. Here's 2 major changes that I find a little bit interesting. Number 1, Zora actually made the first fuel-injected one back in 1957, which does honestly make the Corvette a somewhat early adopter of fuel injection, even if it really wasn't the standard for the car yet. And finally, it got its signature twin brake light design in the back in 1961. Now, there really are loads of more changes, but a lot of them are really boring and it would just take way too long. It finally leads us in 1963 to the C2 Corvette. I'll let Real Me go tell you more about it.
We have today an actual Corvette with us. It's a 1965 Chevrolet Corvette. It's got the 327 in it, making about 350 horsepower. It's got a 4-speed manual in it. This is just iconic. This is what you want from an American muscle car. Muscle cars were sporty here in America, okay? This was essentially one of America's better attempts at making a sporty car. And by that I mean it was really good in a straight line. I hadn't really entirely figured out the whole turning thing yet. I know that from experience. I learned to drive on this car. I learned how to drive manual on this car. I grew up around this car. This car is fantastic. Yeah, back to the studio. My bedroom. Back to my bedroom.
Now, to throw some more hard data at you, the C2 is really and truly where the Corvette gets into the swing of things. It immediately eclipsed the sales of the C1, selling 20,000 units in its first year. And the C2 managed to have some of the most rare and sought-after vets to this day. This could have been for a number of reasons, whether it be the looks, or it could have been the improved engine option with a better V8, or even that it was actually the first US car with full disc brakes. The most commonly known Corvette that is sought after from this generation is the 1963 with the split window design, which ended up getting removed in 1964 after only 1 model year for a couple reasons. Some of it was safety, but some of it was also Zora just didn't like it that way. And Zora was the head designer for the car at this point. He even wanted to make the car mid-engine. He was unfortunately shot down by his own management. But it didn't stop them from making a fast vet like the L88, which is possibly the most rare Corvette you could ever get, with only 20 of them ever being made. It had a modified L88 427 cubic inch V8 making a reported 450 horsepower and could do drag times in the high 11-second range. After the great success of the C2, the C3 managed to get off to an even better start, selling 30,000 units in its first year. That success helped propel it into becoming the longest running Corvette ever. The C3 ran all the way from 1968 to 1982. While it may not be everyone's favorite car or everyone's favorite Corvette, it definitely helped establish the Vette as an iconic part of America. I'd like to do a quick little important note. It's honestly really hard for me to seriously judge cars like this. I was born in 2000. I have no real concept of what these cars were like. So I'm mostly going off of what my parents in older forum posts talk about. Although I have heard the C3 isn't awesome. After running for well over a decade, the Corvette nameplate took a year break. But then in 1984, the C4 Corvette was released. And while it may look pretty plain now, this was probably the biggest change the Corvette had yet. And at one point it was going to be even more radical. For the first time since 1963, Zorda wasn't directly responsible for the car's design. However, he did still have plenty of influence on it. He again pushed for a mid-engine car, but was given a no-go by Chevy again, this time because they didn't want to give up the V8, but they didn't think they could fit it behind the driver. He also experimented this generation with other engine types, even going with something as radical as a rotary engine. But throughout all of it, Chevy decided to stick with the now standard V8 in the front. But just because they didn't do anything new and interesting doesn't mean they didn't make some really solid C4s, such as the ZR1. Made 375 horsepower, had upgraded suspension, the ZR1 honestly became the basis for all of the fast Vettes afterward. Kind of like how the basic design for the C4 became the basis for every Vette that followed it. In 1997, the C4 got a brilliant follow-up with the C5. The C5 Corvette was actually the first to feature the LS engine, which is a ubiquitous V8 used by a lot of Chevy platforms now. It's a very compact, amazingly designed engine that could deserve a whole video behind it and the different cars that it's in. The C5 was also designed to have much better weight distribution. It wasn't a dainty sports car like the Europeans going on at the time. It was more like a rock star in the corners. It was loud, it was aggressive, but that didn't mean it was bad or slow. It was honestly pretty good. This was the first Vette that was fully confident that America could develop its own style of sports car. Dodge thought the same thing around the time, making the Dodge Viper. The only sad part about this generation is it ended up being the last one to use pop-up headlights. If you want a cheap, good Vette, I would say this is the generation to hunt down. They sold really well, so they're around, and they're honestly built really well. The LS is tried and true. Now, although the C5 is doing great, it can't go forever. So in 2005, the C6 came out. And while it may look pretty similar to the previous generation C5, this car's honestly when the Corvette started to become outright fast. It wasn't just a big light body with a powerful engine. The suspension was capable of keeping up with it. But it's almost like the engine department went to war with the suspension department, because this generation had some racy performance trims or two. With the absurd 7-liter LS7 in the Z06 and the biblically fast 6.2-liter ZR1. This insane trim made 700 horsepower and was capable of 192 confirmed miles per hour. And we're still not done, because in 2014, the C7 was released. Once again, the C7 was almost made mid-engine, but they decided to keep it front engine to keep the cost down. Because the car was something they were so used to designing, they truly pushed the platform to its limits. Even the base model at this point was making an eye-watering 455 horsepower. It was clear that this Vette was not just around to continue a nameplate. This car was really good. It had a way to actively track your lap times around a track. This was a seriously fast car. But the most fastest one was the last ZR1 so far. It was made in the final C7 model year of 2019, and it made 755 horsepower. I don't even have like a, that moves mountains. That's absurd. And it could do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat. it barely even looked like the C7 anymore. Now, at this point, the original front engine V8 design was really and truly maxing out the concept. At some point, physics just kind of wins that fight. Now, the chassis was honestly great, incorporating much needed carbon fiber into the Vette, and Chevy designers, as far as suspension tuning goes, are some of the best in the business. You see this with their other muscle car, the Camaro. But as we can see from this pace car incident, the car really was starting to hit its limits. So they finally decided to give Zora his real wish for the Corvette all along. They took the V8 and they put it behind the driver. And in 2020, the Corvette started a new era with the C8. This wasn't the only major change the car would have. They used more carbon than ever before and gave it a pretty radical interior. And for the first major performance edition, they ditched the simple pushrod V8, the thing that's been powering Corvettes for nearly 70 years. And instead, with a supercar style flat plane V8 that screams. Even made a trim called the E-Ray, and it's hybrid, and it's got all-wheel drive. This ain't your granddad's Corvette. This is the car rocketing the Corvette name from American sporty muscle to American supercar. With rumors abound on what the next ZR1 Vette even will be, and it is coming, we haven't even begun to see the limits for the Corvette name. And I bet it's gonna be around for a lot longer. What's your favorite model year of the Corvette? And if you have a car that you want me to do next week, make sure to tell me that too below. Go ahead and hit all of the fancy buttons like and subscribe so that way I can buy a Corvette one day. All right, I'm Austin. I still don't have an outro. Bye, have a good day. Watch all my videos. Bye-bye.